Just to clarify sort of the numbers so we're all talking from the same page. Our higher education budget is about $1 billion. That's about $1 billion for higher, that's all higher education. And if all higher education were to be held whole, made whole without any cuts, we're talking about $1 billion for everybody. That's the Southern, LCTCS, that's UL system, that's LSU. Compare and contrast that with tax credits that go to various entities, that's about $7 billion that go out in tax credits and other things. More importantly, however, though, about 250 million of that 1 billion is sort of a washout. It's a supplanting issue because that's TOPS. That's the TOPS program. And quite honestly, TOPS doesn't bring new revenues to the university. TOPS supplants revenues that might have been brought to the university by families, by students. So I want us to start from the same source here. So in other words, we're really operating with about $743 million or $750 million for all higher education. The magnitude of this cut being at whether it's our system office or the regent's office using $608 million, we've calculated about $581 million. So we'll roughly say it's about $600 million in reductions, potential reductions if everything goes unmitigated. So if nothing else happens but this budget gets passed as is, without the tax credits changes, without a lot of the things that our legislative leadership has shown a great interest in trying to tackle and address, we're looking at about an 82% budget reduction. And 82%, I want to just put into state terms, since we started measuring higher ed finance through the grapevine at Illinois State University at around 1963, comparing what states do and compare with each other, that's the largest single budget reduction in the history of American higher education since we started measuring it in 1963. That's so large that we're not even sure how we could handle it. We're not even sure whether we would be open next year. And to put it in perspective, when I was in California, we had a very bad year. It was about a 33% budget reduction, of which the authority to raise fees was the only opportunity we had to keep our heads above water. However, we still had to furlough each and every employee 2 days a month throughout the California State University system, which got very complicated. We had 11 unions, managing that through all of the chaos was quite a chaotic year. If we were to furlough, and I asked this first question, what would we have to do if we were to furlough our employees at LSU to meet this budget reduction? Well, this budget reduction is so large, we'd have to furlough everybody for the entire year. For the entire year. Just shut down and everybody get furloughed for a year. And that would only handle the budget reduction for 1 year. That's a non-recurring 1 year. And we're looking at possible recurring ways to generate revenues. And what we've offered our legislative leadership and what we've offered the governor's office is there are some things we need to do to help us become more efficient. We need to manage our own affairs better. We need to get the authority to manage our own affairs better. In fact, $43 million already based in this cut is assuming that our legislative leaders will give us the authority to even charge fees in certain areas that we don't even have the authority to charge, which we'll be working to see if we can get more autonomy and more authority to charge those fees, to better control our own fate, to better manage our own resources through risk management, through procurement, where we do it ourselves and we are not funding the state employees or we are not paying to incarcerate people from our own institution. So this is one of the big challenges. We want these authorities so we can manage better, we can become more efficient, we can also determine where our fees are most utilized, and we've talked with our student government. They said that come to us first and work with us first before you make massive cuts in student services, in counseling, in tutoring, in student health, in all of these areas that our students know and utilize very much and know exactly what we need to preserve and protect. They said they'd work with us to identify where those areas are in the greatest need before we have to make reductions, because that's the first area that always gets cut from a public university is the outside the classroom experiences, which we know is about half of every student's ability to graduate. That dictates about half of that. Through tutorial services, through student union utilization, through leadership opportunities, those are the first areas cut when you're struggling to keep your doors open. Now, before I go to questions, you read a lot about higher education being inefficient. Well, there are a lot of inefficient universities around the country. There are a lot of very inefficient universities that spend way more money than they perhaps need to, and they're ranked based on how much they spend on the fewest amount of students. But let me tell you where we're starting. The starting point from LSU. This is before any cut. A 1% to an 82% reduction occurs. There are 50 flagship universities in this country. Our per student spending, which is the real measure of institutional wealth, just like it is in a K-12 school, our per student spending, when we collect all of our revenues coming in, we able to spend it on our students, we rank 46th of 50 universities in the country. That's the starting point. There are those that have a lot more resources than we do, but we're already starting on the lowest end of those 50 flagship institutions. Now, I'm very proud to say, but I want to let you know that the next set of numbers are the numbers that are at stake, because we can no longer even take bigger hits without having the next set of numbers start declining as well. Of those 50 universities, our graduation rate ranks 25th. Of those 50 universities, our retention ranks 29th. Of those 50 universities, our starting salaries rank 19th, and our mid-career earnings age 42 to 45 rank 14th. So my question is, how long does it take for us to remain at the bottom in per student spending, even before any cuts, till those other four variables start moving down the charts as well? We start declining in retention, we start declining in graduation, we start declining in starting salaries because many of our programs may not even be accredited. Then we start declining later in life with mid-career earnings. That's what's at stake. That's what's at stake. You can only stay on the bottom for so long. So that's why we've been working each and every day with our legislative leaders to help them find solutions. They need to help us with the revenues. We can help them with autonomies, and we can meet them somewhere between 0 and 82% reduction that can perhaps help us survive in the future. Finally, for people that see the big S on our helmet, LSU, in many ways that S isn't as big as it used to be because we're only 13% funded from the state of Louisiana. If this cut goes unmitigated and goes unaddressed in our legislative session, we will go down to we'll be funded by 2.9% coming from the state. Now, I don't think there's any legislator or any person in this state that wants to see LSU at roughly 3% of the state, nor do they want to see LSU simply serving 3% of its student population coming from Louisiana. But these are the stark realities that we're dealing with. And this is why certainly we'll need our population support, whether they're influenced by Pennington, whether they're influenced through our medical schools, our School of Dentistry, and all the academic programs that we provide to this state. Because when we are at 3% funded from the state, you can only imagine what our other peers around the state are going to be. What will happen to Grambling? What will happen to Nichols State? What will happen to many of the LCTCS institutions? What will happen to some of our regionally located campuses? And finally, I'd just like to say, for me, this is nothing but a series of choices. The Land Grant Act that was started in 1862 began the greatest public university experiment in this country, and it became in this world. The Land Grant Act in 1862 was signed by Congress and the President in the middle of the Civil War, right between the battles of Gettysburg and Shiloh. So, in addition, later that year, they started the National Academies of Science in the same year. So when we say, well, these are difficult times financially, these are difficult times because of the choices we've made. When we're spending 7 times as much to incarcerate somebody as we are to educate somebody. These are nothing more than choices. And I'll point out that this country made the right choices decades ago. That's why our 55 to 64-year-old population ranks #1 in the world in college degrees, in the percentage with college degrees. However, our 25 to 34-year-olds rank 12th, and that's declining annually. That's dropping by about a ranking a year. And by 2020, if we do not turn around these trends, we'll be ranked 19th below Bulgaria. So let's start focusing on the next generation of students, because they're our next generation. They are going to drive the next economy of this state. They're going to drive the next economy of this country. And we need to start paying attention to the generation on the way, instead of the generation that has gone through the system, that is already reaping the benefits of having gone to college, having participated in college. The other difference today is, as the Gallup poll just recently showed, never in the history of American higher education have more parents wanted their kids to go to college. 93% want them to go to college somewhere. We are not in a position to turn our backs on them now. We are in a position to give them greater access to quality higher education. And that's what we're going to be working on in the coming months. And we'll appreciate your support as we go forward. Thank you very much for coming out. Now I open the floor to questions. I gave you some of our expenditures. And expenditures, for us, quite honestly, I think everybody will tell you down the street that we have a revenue problem. And we've cut our way so thin that I said, well, you know, we can always be more efficient as a university. We can just close. And then we won't cost anybody anything. But think about the cost to the economy, and think about the cost to the next generation that will accrue to them. We're also in a national spiral, part of a national spiral, where we think that college should be simply paid for by the student because it's simply an individual benefit. What we're forgetting is the 12% return, that the social benefits that accrue to everybody else because those students did go to college and finish, because those students became tax-paying citizens, not tax-paying liabilities, because those students wanted clean air and clean water. So it's the social benefits that I don't want us to lose sight of. Each and every one of us, for every dollar spent, gets a 12% return because you invested in somebody else's child, and somebody else's student, not just your own, but somebody else's. That has been a consistently measured since 1962, when Theodore Schultz and Gary Becker won the Nobel Prize for measuring the social, societal benefits that all of us, by having a cleaner environment, by having sidewalks, by having deforestation, clean water, by the economic reality of it, those individuals are paying taxes into the system and not relying on taxes to carry them, whether it's through prison or social programs that keep growing and expanding, by having less inequality in our society, more people contributing, volunteerism. So I think we need to rethink, when we go into the legislature, about the real asset to this state is not in 5 or 6 companies moving here. The real asset, as I pointed out, is not in how many products we're importing or exporting and what's our ratio. The greatest asset to any state, the greatest asset to any nation is the human capital. It's the investment in the next generation. They're going to create an economy that we can't even think about in decades to come. And I have faith they're going to do that. They're going to transform this economy. So I'd like us to think and start investing in the next generation of human capital, in their minds, giving them the opportunities to build our economy here with their talents. Because if we don't do that, they're going to build it somewhere. They're going to build an economy in Vancouver, Canada. They're going to build an economy that we will compete against in Houston, Texas, or in Atlanta. And I'd like us to start focusing on this human capital, the economics of human capital, and the talented students that we have, and the talented students that are on the way, and start factoring them into the equation of economic growth for this state. I said, the students asked, what should we do? And we said, well, first of all, you need to sign up for the advocates, the Alumni Association, but also you need to be annoying. I mean, by that I mean students, there are 2 reasons why legislators listen to people. One is because they vote in large numbers, and one is because they contribute to campaigns. The students right now do neither. They don't vote in large numbers, and they certainly don't have the resources to contribute to campaigns. So what they have to do is make sure their voice is getting heard. And that means collectively they need to get together, and all of our students in higher education need to make sure that they let our legislators know they vote, that they let our legislators know that they're paying attention. Because everybody says they support education. Just go to their website. Good. I asked our students to find out if they really did. And our students need to become active, become politically active. Otherwise, it's a generational issue that they're going to get left behind. And all the costs of their education are going to accrue to them. So that's, by being annoying, I mean, get your voice heard. Make sure that they know you're out there. Make sure they know that what you see at stake. For example, when I told student government that if this cut goes through as is, you will have 2,000 less classes next year to choose from. That means your retention rate slows down, your graduation rate slows down. You may not even have any courses to sign up for when you reduce it by about 50% of the course offerings. So let your voices be heard collectively. Don't be passive in this situation. Let our legislators know that you count, that you really do matter. And that means not being passive. And that's what I mean by that. What most people don't know, we have 16 foundations. 3 main ones on the flagship campus, and then the rest are in the medical centers in Pennington and others. Unfortunately, we have not raised the funds that we need to raise as a flagship university. Our endowment per student is among one of the lowest in the country. And one of the problems that we've had is that we haven't been coordinated. We've had everybody hoarding their own donors, operating independently, with little attention from the president and little attention from the chancellor to help coordinate. We don't even have a common data system. So the coordination of this is going to be vital to doing what I know we can do. But I've had legislators mention this to me. When we say we had a $40 million gift, which is a charitable trust that we probably won't see for 20, 25, 30 years, I've had legislators say, well, then you need $40 million less. This supplanting has got to stop. The substitution has got to stop. Fundraising can provide the margin of excellence for us, and we should be raising about 100 and 150 million a year. We will get up there this year, but on average, we've been about 30 million a year. So this is a unique opportunity for us to have all of our foundations working together under the same umbrella for the same purpose. And that has been a challenge for our institution, but it's happened, that has grown out of neglect as well. And we haven't paid enough attention to what we should be doing in fundraising. But I do not want people to think that that's going to substitute for our state funds. That helps in so many ways, but it is not a substitution of the public at large and what our state should be doing for our public universities. Message is that we need everybody to understand that if this budget goes forward and we're not able to address these challenges, that higher education will be in the worst shape that it's ever been in. And that impacts families, that impacts students, that impacts faculty members, staff members, but more importantly, it impacts the economy of each of these regions, because we'll be putting out less graduates going to new jobs that we're talking about on the WISE Fund. So it has a domino effect that is significant. We'll be in New York later this week to talk about LSU's bond rating, of which could take a big hit at the end of the week or moving into next week, which means that'll cost us more money to operate. So all of these things have a domino effect on higher education, but on the lives of every citizen in this state.
What kind of an impact for students? You mentioned student-teacher ratio and also Louisiana's position compared to other universities throughout the country.
Well, actually, this is very unique for us because I mentioned this certainly to the governor and others, that unlike 08, 09, when this country was going through a recession and there were 49 other states dealing with massive budget reductions, this one there's only about 3 of us out there. And it's Illinois, Wisconsin, and Louisiana, and ours is the worst of the 3. So I think there's going to be a lot of national attention on this issue. Other universities are not dealing with the scale or scope of this type of reduction anywhere in the United States.
From a historical standpoint, what kind of an impact is this having?
This has massive impact. I mean, when we're talking about
furloughs, we're talking about campus closures, we're talking about making decisions. Some of these decisions haven't been thought about in over a century. What it's going to impact. The whole dental school in New Orleans, for example. How are we going to respond to this? The parish-based agricultural centers and research stations. We'll have to eliminate the parish-based system that we have in our ag centers and go to narrow it down by about 50 to 60% of those facilities that serve virtually every student in those parishes and every parent that's in the agrarian environment.
With the legislative session starting April 13th, what do you feel needs to happen for higher education?
I think we need to get some solutions on the table and start moving them forward and tackling this problem as soon as possible and not waiting to the very end where we know whether we're going to be held whole or whether they're going to take a massive cut. Our decisions have to get made in April on how many classes we're going to offer, what type of financial aid the students are going to apply for next fall. So our decisions have to be made, the people we're going to hire for next fall and people we're going to keep for next fall. So our decisions are ongoing, but I think the sooner the better they can help us with some remedies, the better trust and the more we'll be much more comfortable knowing what's going ahead if we can get them taken care of early.